Chapter 101, Halloween Dinner and Pumpkin House. History of Magic was over. Professor Binns's final answer had been a little unreasonable, but when had magic ever been reasonable? If anything, alchemy was the only subject that felt remotely sensible. That evening, the whole castle smelled of pumpkin, sweet, spicy, unmistakably Halloween. The great hall was decked with live bats, as was customary. Hagrid's giant pumpkins were on display, carved into lanterns. Some had even been hollowed out into pumpkin houses big enough for 3 or 4 people. Most striking of all was the colossal spider web that hung above the hall's entrance. A gigantic black spider crawled along it, twitching its hairy legs now and then. Every so often, the spider would pick a passing student, and a silver-gray web would drop, wrapping the unlucky wizard completely. The resulting shrieks and laughter were a standing attraction, especially for younger students who would hang back just to watch. Click! A sharp sound, a flash of white. Colin's hands trembled with excitement. Everything felt unreal. The owl's letter, the Hogwarts Express, the boat to the castle. Tonight was his first festival and his first feast as a student. There was so much to photograph, he worried he'd run out of film. On the other side of the hall, Eno watched the flash and felt an idea bloom. He could be more than a bard in a fantasy world. He could be a photographer, too. Over the last 3 years, he had lived through too many farewells and missed chances. If only he'd had a camera earlier. Old John's Square, the White Witch's ice castle, the elves in the deep woods, the final battle beneath the lonely mountain. How many memories would have been preserved? He told himself he would find old Dervish the next day and ask him to modify a camera. A voice cut through his thoughts. Why are you just getting here? Hurry up. I had Goyle reserve a pumpkin house ages ago. It was Draco. Eno hesitated. He knew exactly what the pumpkin houses were called at Hogwarts, the Halloween couples' houses, and how few there were. The idea of a boy inviting another boy into one felt awkward in the worst kind of spotlight. Draco, noticing his pause, sounded annoyed. Pansy and Daphne are already inside. Goyle got a huge one, fits 4 easy. Oh, then let's go, Eno said quickly, more relieved than he let on. They walked along the edge of the hall and soon found the pumpkin Goyle had claimed. Hagrid had somehow grown it as large as a small car. Daphne's small head popped out of the pumpkin window. Eno, come in, she called, leaning on the sill with a smile. Inside, the pumpkin stem formed a little central table. The walls had been hollowed out and lined with mats, creating a cozy raised bench all the way around. Pansy and Daphne sat opposite him. A pile of candies and snacks filled the tiny stem table. This is my first time in one, Eno said, looking around. It was snug and comforting, hard not to like. Last year Goyle got one too, but Quirrell ruined the feast, Draco said with a half-proud shrug. As they chatted, Pansy, who had been quiet, suddenly looked serious. Eno, are we like what you said on the train? Rats in the sewers, while we hide in the castle, hide in a pumpkin house? Her comment was a buzzkill for the holiday, and both Draco and Daphne went quiet. Eno felt a headache coming on. He had thought that remark forgotten after 2 months. He hadn't expected it to stick. Still, he decided it was time to be straightforward. Slytherins were not the type to let things go because they'd heard them once. Fine, he said. If we're going to talk about it, we should talk properly. This is a bit heavy, but... He lowered his voice as the pumpkin walls muffled the sounds of the great hall outside. First, we need to understand something. The International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy, signed in 1689 and enforced in 1692, and how it changed wizarding life. If he hadn't listened to Professor Binns's lecture earlier, Eno would have struggled to pull the dates out of his head. For the next half hour, he retold the history of magic lecture from that morning. Not in Binns's dry, sleep-inducing way, but trimmed down to the essentials. He left out the long-winded anecdotes and kept the turning points. Why secrecy became law, what it meant for wizards living among muggles, and the muggle-repelling charm Binns had mentioned. Let's remember that turning point, Eno finished quietly, and pay tribute to the people who sacrificed so we can sit here, eating and talking without being hunted. We really are like rats in the sewers, Draco muttered, astonished. How pitiful, Pansy agreed. Daphne nodded, thoughtful. Eno had simply summarized Binns's lecture, no personal commentary, yet their reactions were more emotional than he'd expected. Come on, It wasn't me making it dramatic, Eno protested. That's what Professor Binns taught. He even covered the muggle-repelling charm. If you want, I can go over the magic part for you later. Professor Binns taught magic? Draco's questions tumbled out. He sounded incredulous. History of magic? And he actually taught spells? Yes, history of magic, Eno said, rubbing his forehead. It's your own fault for sleeping through it. Daphne sighed. That old ghost of a professor. His voice puts you right to sleep. I try to listen, but I can't help it. Pansy looked at Eno with a new idea forming. Why don't you teach us? You're the only one in Slytherin who seems to tolerate Professor Binns's lectures. From now on, after every history of magic class, let's meet. I bet more people will want to join. Last year, apart from you, everyone else got either a P or an A in the class. Eno waited for a moment. It was only once a week and he could handle it. Better to help than to let Pansy sulk. All right, he said. After history of magic, find a place and I'll go over it with you. The pumpkin around them hummed softly, with their voices and laughter from the hall drifted like a warm background. Outside, the great hall glowed with jack-o'-lanterns, and the spider on the web twitched as another silver strand dropped and trapped a squealing first year, to the delight of the watching crowd. Inside the pumpkin house, with candy scattered on the little stem table, they went on talking about history, about secrets, and in small, careful ways, about belonging. Chapter 102, Listing Comments. This is Xiaodi's second time writing a thank you note. I still feel a little uneasy. Although this book's numbers are much better than the last one, I'm still a newcomer, and the run-up to a launch always brings a few inexplicable jitters. Anyway, enough rambling. Thank you to all my new and returning readers for your support. Every comment, every recommendation, every monthly ticket, every reward, I'm truly grateful. Whether it's tickets or comments, the back end always shows them. Seeing familiar names and new ones makes me very happy. Of course, when some familiar names disappear or fall silent for a while, I'm sad too. To be honest, I remember your names because after I publish each chapter, I spend half an hour carefully reading the comments. P.S. If possible, please don't use those long numeric IDs. They're hard to tell apart, and I end up comparing the last 4 digits every time. Tomorrow is May 1st, and Bard will officially launch. I shamelessly ask for early subscriptions. Full subscriptions would be wonderful, but I don't expect that. It all depends on whether you find the story exciting. Still, I'd really appreciate those initial subscriptions, okay? Finally, I wish everyone a happy, safe, and enjoyable holiday. Don't overwork yourselves. Take some time to relax and recharge. Meow. Time to write. Chapter 103. First violation of school rules. Without Tom and without the basilisk, the second-year Halloween feast was unusually lively. Everyone tried to make the most of it, and the curfew on the night of the feast was extended to midnight. After all, the next day was Halloween, and Hogwarts would, as usual, have the day off. Even with the extension, most students only began to disperse after 10, and they didn't head straight to bed. They migrated to their house common rooms for a second, smaller feast. Slytherin's common room was no exception. Even gathered together, the house's old class distinctions persisted. Based on family background and status, students clustered into small circles. At that moment, Eno sat only with Draco, Pansy, and Daphne, representing the pure-blood sacred 28 families, Malfoy, Parkinson, and Greengrass. The rest of the year would never step over to sit with them. It wasn't personal, rules were rules, and Slytherin had its systems. The room stayed noisy until about 11. After that, the boisterousness ebbed. People moved into smaller groups, sipping pumpkin juice and butterbeer, nibbling odd candies, and trading gossip. Feeling the moment was right, Eno rose and made his way toward the largest, oldest group in the room. "Excuse me, Mr. Flint, may I have a few minutes?" he asked. Marcus Flint, Slytherin's Quidditch captain, grinned, showing his buck teeth. "Of course, Mr. Swinburne, follow me." They slipped into a quieter corner. Eno said plainly, "I need your help. Tomorrow, during the holiday, I want to go to Hogsmeade. I need the hair of a third-year or older student who is allowed into Hogsmeade." He spoke directly and at the same time slid 2 galleons toward Flint. In the past few days, Eno had learned Flint's particular brand of shrewdness, not clever in an academic way, but practical and opportunistic. If there was profit, he'd be helpful. If someone seemed worthless, he'd be cold. Flint took the coins with a practiced grin. "Ha ha! That'll be easy," Flint said, slipping the galleons into his pocket. "I'll have it ready by 8 in the morning. And don't worry about exposure. The one who provides the hair will keep his word. He won't leave the common room before you get back. I guarantee it." "I believe you," Eno said. Flint had a reputation for being reliable in these matters. There were rumors that he'd even pay double when things went wrong. After the arrangement, Eno excused himself back to the dormitory to get enough sleep. He had to be up early. Walking back, he thought about how others tried to break curfew. Secret passages, invisibility cloaks, flashy but reckless. They were all about running and hiding, not using a bit of cunning. Those methods left you anxious and inexperienced, like dark wizards who never see daylight. The night passed uneventfully. At 8 the next morning, Eno arrived at the Slytherin common room on time. Flint was dozing on the sofa. He yawned, stood, and produced a folded parchment envelope from his pocket. "Rick Sparrow, half-blood, 3rd year. There's enough here for you for the whole day. Don't worry, I'm here," Flint called. Eno took the envelope. "Thanks, Mr. Flint." They exchanged a nod, and Flint shuffled back toward his dormitory. The kind of holiday morning a Quidditch captain took seriously involved more sleeping than scheming. Eno had already drunk the polyjuice potion and taken on the appearance of a short, slightly chubby Slytherin boy freckled with acne. The disguise made the potion's taste even harder to endure. Every sip seemed to scrape at his palate, but it had worked. Filch had been fooled, and he hurried toward Hogsmeade. About half an hour later, he pushed into Flourish and Blots and bought a copy of Advanced Potion Making. Then he left the main shopping street and turned down a quieter lane. Flourish and Blots sat away from Hogsmeade's bustling thoroughfare. The shop fronted a hidden residential strip, more like a repair stall than a flashy retail front, appropriate for a place that did more mending than selling. The lane was lined with time-worn cottages, their walls marred by weather and age. On a corner sat a tiny shop, no more than 10 square meters. Its walls had yellowed, and the sign had faded. The door stood open, revealing a sparse interior, a long walnut table, a tall-backed chair, and a simple shelf. On the chair, an old man with white hair and a dark blue robe sat bent over his work. Deep lines marked his face, but his eyes were sharp behind black, round spectacles. The long table was strewn with odd parts and tools. The old man's hands moved with practiced ease, now a wand, now a carving knife, each motion deliberate, as if every small detail mattered. He worked steadily and quietly, wholly absorbed. Eno paused at the doorway and waited until the man finished a brief task and set down his tools. Then he stepped forward and knocked lightly. "Good day, Mr. Dervish." Chapter 104, 10 musical instruments and a one-handed sword, Hogsmeade, in front of Dervish and Bangas. "Good day, Mr. Dervish," Eno greeted softly as he stepped into the shop. "Welcome to Bangas Repair, Dervish stopped mid-sentence, narrowed his eyes, and studied the boy opposite him. "The scent of polyjuice potion. Who are you?" His smile vanished, replaced by a calm, probing look. Eno felt an odd unease at that stare, like a rabbit suddenly aware of a golden eagle circling overhead. Any small move felt like it might draw a deadly swoop. "It's me, Eno, from the alley next door. I snuck out of Hogwarts," he blurted. At that, Dervish's face softened into an even warmer grin. "Eno, I always thought you were a good lad. I didn't expect you'd start sneaking out. I'll write to Phileas in a minute." His tone was more teasing than stern. "He can't do anything to me," Eno waved a hand. "I'm not a Ravenclaw. Professor Phileas can't control me." "Yes, you're not a Ravenclaw." Dervish's eyes dimmed for a moment, and he muttered, "What a world. They don't even know what Ravenclaws become. I don't understand them." He was already drifting into one of his nostalgic monologues. "No time for that. Polyjuice is awful to drink," Eno interrupted briskly. He had learned over the summer that once Dervish got started reminiscing, nothing would stop him. He wanted to get down to business. "Mr. Dervish, I want to order instruments, quite a lot. Clarinets, violins, timpani, harps, saxophones, guitars, trombones, and if the price is right, a piano too." "That many? This will be a big project." Dervish took off his black-rimmed glasses, retrieved an old brown notebook from a drawer, and began jotting down items. 10 minutes later, he looked up. "Without the piano, 9 instruments come to 125 galleons. With the piano, it's exactly 200 galleons. Eno did a quick mental calculation. 125 galleons for 9 custom instruments was very fair. He'd paid 10 galleons for a single accordion in Diagon Alley once, so this was a bargain. A piano for 75 galleons was reasonable too. All right, include the piano. Here's the 30% deposit. He counted out 60 galleons and set them on the counter. He'd originally paid Pansy 9,000 for the house and kept a few hundred galleons aside for emergencies. Today it was crunch time. Oh, since you're spending so much, can I get a little extra? Eno added, embarrassed to ask, but short on cash. This isn't Zonko's. What would you want as a freebie? Dervish said, amused. A file? No file. I want a longsword, one-handed, not a decoration, something sharp enough to pierce a troll's hide. And could you help me cobble together an old camera? It doesn't need to look pretty, just to work. Dervish nearly choked on his mirth. A longsword to pierce a troll's hide as a freebie after spending 200 galleons? Shall I give you the Gryffindor sword while I'm at it? Realizing he sounded ridiculous, Eno backpedaled quickly. All right, just make it sturdy and sharp, nothing toy-like. That's more reasonable, Dervish huffed. 2 extra galleons for the one-handed sword, and I'll throw in the camera for free. Then, muttering to himself as he wrote it down, what does a Slytherin want with a one-handed sword? The Sorting Hats really got some nerve. They agreed on a pickup time, and Eno went back to Hogwarts alone. Ever since he'd bought the house in Hogsmeade, the village no longer held the same thrill for him. Like residents of a tourist town, he rarely visited the sights. He returned without incident and found Flint sitting on a sofa in the common room, animatedly talking about something. After exchanging a look, Eno slipped to the bathroom for a few minutes and emerged in his normal appearance. Mr. Swinburne, please wait, someone called from behind. He turned to see a young Slytherin first year he didn't recognize. He couldn't recall the name. Can I help you? Eno asked. I just met Professor McGonagall in the castle, the boy said quickly. Breathless with nerves, she asked me to tell you that if you have time, could you come to the Transfiguration office? All right, thank you. What's your name? Eno asked. Harper Wick, the boy replied, relief evident in his voice. Goodbye, Mr. Wick. Eno nodded and waved him off. Transfiguration office. Although it was Halloween and a holiday, Professor McGonagall was at her desk, unusually cheerful. Today's Transfiguration department had answered. After Bill Weasley, Hogwarts would have another young wizard winning the Best Newcomer award. A knock sounded. McGonagall opened the door with a flick of her wand and beamed as she saw Eno. Eno, come here quickly. Your thesis has been recognized. Transfiguration sent a prize and a certificate. Good day, Professor. This is the best news I've heard today. Eno felt a surge of happiness, not so much for the honor itself as because he'd heard there might be a monetary award. His funds had taken a hit with the instrument order. He went to the desk. Professor McGonagall handed him the certificate and a letter. He wanted to check the Gringotts pouch that usually accompanied such awards, but she had already given him the documents first. He suppressed his impatience and read the letter carefully. Chapter 105, Professor McGonagall's Promise. Dear Mr. Eno Swinburne, we are pleased to inform you that your Transfiguration thesis, The World as a Whole, has won the 1992 Best Newcomer Award for Transfiguration Theses. The letter was short. Eno skimmed it quickly. Most of it was the usual courteous phrasing, pleasant but not very useful. At the end, however, was the detail he'd hoped for. To encourage further work, the editorial board of today's Transfiguration has unanimously decided to award you a bonus of 150 galleons. Money in hand meant peace of mind. Eno let out a quiet breath. He had feared today's Transfiguration would be parsimonious and offer only a token sum, but 150 galleons, while not huge, would solve his immediate problems. Finished reading? Professor McGonagall had been watching him. When she saw him fold the letter, she spoke. There's something I'd like your permission for, she said. I'd like to make a copy of this certificate for the Transfiguration Club's records, and I'd also like to formally invite you to join my Transfiguration Club. It would be an honor, Professor. Eno accepted immediately. Who would refuse? McGonagall's private academic club was reserved for true geniuses. Even Hermione hadn't been chosen in her years at Hogwarts. The only well-known member in living memory was Hufflepuff's rising star, Cedric Diggory. The club's membership and other details were largely secret, but everyone knew the bar to join was extremely high, so high that many students left Hogwarts without ever knowing it existed. McGonagall's smile widened when he agreed. We meet Thursday evenings, 7 to 9. The meeting place is on the corridor of the third floor of the castle, though I can only say that much. Finding the entrance is a test every new member must pass. She paused, then joked. Don't expect me to make it easy. I'll tell the others that next Thursday you'll have to find it on your own. Professor, I wasn't planning on slacking, Eno protested. It was just an entrance to find. No cheating required. If he failed, he still had his divination dice. That's for the best. And put that bonus away, McGonagall said, waving her wand to duplicate the certificate. Eno accepted the duplicate and slipped the bag of galleons into his robe pocket. Professor, may I trouble you for a few minutes? He asked. Of course, I have plenty of time during the holidays, she replied. I've been curious about one thing. Animagus. Do the animals a wizard becomes come about completely at random, or can a wizard influence the outcome? Eno hesitated, but asked the question outright. Animagus was practical, but notoriously capricious. He didn't want to spend months of effort only to end up as something hopelessly unsuitable, a fish, a snail, or some other aquatic or soft-bodied creature. A beetle would be unpleasant but manageable. A frog or fish would be a disaster. McGonagall's expression softened into a tired, helpless look. Animagus, again. You lot. Never mind. It's not your fault. Decades of teaching had taught her how these things worked. If she tried to forbid them outright, a determined student would simply research in secret. So she used a different tack. Eno, first. Animagus is very dangerous. Professor, let me finish. Don't interrupt. She rubbed her temples. With your current transfiguration level, you barely meet the threshold to attempt Animagus. I know I can't stop you because none of you would listen, so go and put a mandrake leaf in your mouth. I imagine you've already looked up the procedure. It was a deliberate delay. McGonagall had seen too many hopefuls get stuck on the first hard step. After months of stalling, their enthusiasm would fade. It worked far better than blunt dissuasion. I've already got one, Eno admitted. The potion's ready and stowed in a lightless box, waiting for a thunderstorm. McGonagall's eye twitched. She had found students sneaking off to study Animagus before, but never one who'd prepared so meticulously in secret. I suppose I really can't stop you, she sighed. Now, to answer your question, Animagus form depends only on personality and body weight. No other factor affects the final animal. There is a method used at Wagadu that allows a wizard to limit a small selection of possible forms, but Hogwarts does not teach it. Thank you, Professor. I understand, Eno said, bowing slightly. The answer confirmed what he feared, and that Wagadu's transfiguration was on another level. What do you mean? Understand? McGonagall snapped, clapping her hand on the table. Are you planning another trip to the library? Wagadu's transfiguration is not something you can learn from books alone, unless you intend to go there to study. When he saw her irritation, Eno decided to end the subject, though he still planned to consult the library. Observation went both ways. While he watched McGonagall, she watched him. Are you trying to run off to Wagadu? Their transfiguration doesn't even use wands. Come on, put your wand down and turn that match into a needle for me. She took a match from the drawer and flicked it onto the table. I'm not running off, Eno said. I only meant to look. I didn't mean to study it abroad. She sighed. Very well. When you take the potion, remember to tell me. After a moment, she made a decision and spoke with a softer, resolute tone. I don't want you to be harmed by transfiguration. Too many young wizards have suffered permanent damage attempting Animagus. As for registration and that sort of thing, don't worry. I'll pretend I didn't see it. Beneath her formality and strictness, McGonagall's concern for her students always came first. Faced with that, Eno had no better response than a solemn promise. Professor, I'll tell you before I drink the potion. You have my word. Chapter 106, Duel Club Without Basilisk, Part 2. After reaching an agreement with Professor McGonagall, Eno returned to his dormitory with the certificate and the bonus. He planned to lie low while waiting for the thunderstorm. Since the start of the term, he had felt ungrounded, perhaps the lingering effect of ice and snow magic, but overall he hadn't been steady. Snape's earlier warning and his conversation with McGonagall had made him painfully aware of his shortcomings. The most useful thing from that talk wasn't the bits about Wagadu or the factors influencing animagus transformations. It was McGonagall's offhand challenge, "Throw away your wand and turn a match into a needle for me," that broke the last shred of pride he had left. Arrogance comes from ignorance. Humility comes from wisdom. In the dormitory, Enos sat on the edge of his bed, muttering to himself. Without his wand, he couldn't even turn a match into a needle. No amount of excuses, no skill with ice and snow magic, no terrifying anaconda summoned in practice could change that fact. Without a wand, he couldn't perform transfiguration. The Best Newcomer award certificate in his hand suddenly looked ridiculous, the red wax seal like a clown's nose. He stood, opened the box by his bed, and without hesitation put the certificate at the very bottom. Time moved on steadily. 3 days after Halloween, Hogwarts received its first snow. With the first flakes, the temperature plunged and the whole castle was dusted in silver, clean and dazzling. Maybe because of the cold, the younger students preferred the common rooms. The huge fireplaces with warming charms made them feel like spring. The castle seemed sluggish in the weather, and the students' wing spirits were a bit low. When drowsiness came, someone always offered a pillow. After charms on Friday morning, as Eno and Draco passed through the entrance hall, they spotted a knot of students at the notice board reading a newly posted parchment. The crowd buzzed with excitement. When there was a spectacle to be seen, Draco was never one to miss it. He pushed through and made a path for Eno. "Dueling club? Lockhart. Everyone's gone mad," Draco read aloud, incredulous. He couldn't picture Lockhart organizing a club, let alone a duel club. "Eno, what do you think?" Draco asked. "I don't think anything," Eno said. "I'd rather stay in the dorm and read." Draco rolled his eyes. His roommate had slipped back into first-year bookworm mode, caring for nothing but books in the library. How dare Lockhart organize a dueling club? Who gave him the nerve? "Not nerve," Eno said with a small smile. "Fate. Rabbits walk into traps for the grass. Donkeys wear harnesses for the carrots. Things are destined. They can't be helped, especially when the old hunter is still watching from the side." "You're speaking in riddles again," Draco huffed. "Are you going? Come on, it's the weekend. Watching the show can't hurt." "No," Eno said firmly. "I need to study the weather. Theoretically, England's winter is governed by the North Atlantic current and prevailing westerlies, temperate oceanic climate. Winters are relatively mild. Most precipitation falls as rain and is frequent, but thunderstorms are still possible." "Right. Another one gone mad." Draco stared at the vaulted ceiling of the Great Hall, as if it might answer for Eno's oddness. By evening, the common rooms were unusually quiet. Over 80% of the students had gone to the Great Hall. They had different reasons. Some to witness what they expected to be a farce, others genuinely curious. The dueling club had drawn attention. The castle had been unnervingly peaceful this year. No fights, not even whispered quarrels. None of that mattered to Eno. The round table in the Slytherin dormitory was covered in books about meteorology. He fretted about winter thunderstorms. It had been nearly half a year since he'd last entered the fantasy world. Unless something changed, the next entry would be before Christmas. He wanted to finish his animagus work before that. But in England, winter thunderstorms were rare, so time felt tight. The Great Hall was anything but quiet. The long house tables had been moved aside and a gilded stage set up against one wall. Hundreds of floating candles lit the room, and the ceiling had turned black velvet again. After being knocked down twice by Snape, Lockhart had popped up, plucked a comb from his inner pocket, and smoothed his hair with theatrical grace. "Did you see that?" he crowed. "I didn't hesitate to let myself be knocked down twice to show you all how humble I can be, though I could have retaliated most easily." Seeing Snape's sour look, Lockhart quickly changed tack. "Now I need you to come up, Harry. Don't be shy." When Harry stepped forward, Lockhart scanned the students and boomed, "I need someone to duel Harry, preferably from the same year for fairness." "I'll do it," Draco cut in, stepping forward and interrupting Lockhart's flourish. He sneered at Harry. "Hey, Potter, you'd better hope you remembered to wear your underwear today." It seemed like a throwaway insult, but Snape's eyes snapped open at the remark. He paused, then, just for a heartbeat, showed a flicker of anticipation. Harry, perhaps not understanding the link between dueling and underwear, answered with hot temper. Malfoy, you're everywhere like a noisy toad. Why can't you be quiet? Sometimes I really don't want to bother with you, but you always come looking for it. Draco's face went red. He said nothing more. He drew his wand, planted himself opposite Harry, and let his stance speak for him. Chapter 1-7, Greenhouse and Thunderstorm, Part 3. Slytherin Dormitory. So not only did you hang Harry upside down with the Bat-Bogey Hex, you hung Ron up too? Eno watched Draco with interest. It had happened 15 minutes earlier. Draco had burst into the dormitory, grinning from ear to ear, and proceeded to recount his moment in the dueling. Though Draco's retelling was florid, Eno caught the essentials. Yes, both of them. Draco nodded emphatically. You don't know how dangerous it was. Scarhead fired spell after spell at me. If I hadn't ducked and weaved, oh, and that redhead, when he saw Scarhead hanging there, he went charging out to ambush me. He didn't even think about whether he could handle it, and he still tried to ambush you? Eno said. I dodged, then with a backhanded Bat-Bogey Hex, he went up just as obediently. Shame, though, they were both wearing trousers. Draco's voice held mock regret. It had been an epic scene. Eno felt a twinge of regret at missing it. Looks like Professor Snape is in for a good night's sleep, Eno murmured. Draco brightened. You know what's funny? Professor Snape actually smiled. Merlin, Flint, and the others say they've been at the castle 7 years and never seen him smile. But he smiled today. He looked almost human when he did. Outside the castle, the dueling club incident was the hottest topic for days. A week had gone by, and the excitement hadn't faded. Since term began in September, nothing major had happened at Hogwarts. The gossiping wizards had been storing up their energy, and the dueling drama had relieved the pressure with a big bang. Greenhouse number 5, Herbology. It was 4 in the afternoon, the last lesson. After Professor Pomona assigned an essay on puffapods, she opened the greenhouse door and dismissed the class, saying those who wanted to leave could do so, and those who wanted to stay and observe were welcome. Neville and Eno were among the few who remained. In my family's garden there are lots of puffapods, Neville said. When I was little and I missed Mum and Dad, I'd hide there and touch the shiny pods one by one, watching them bloom into little pink flowers. He spoke of a sad time, but his expression stayed upbeat. Eno looked at the round-faced boy and could hardly imagine the child who used to cry outside the greenhouse, now almost a young man, full of cheer. I'm jealous your family grows puffapods, Eno said. When I was a kid, I'd only break a stick off and hit rapeseed flowers. Neville suddenly grew serious. Eno, are you free this Christmas? Gran and my great-uncle want to invite you to the Longbottom ancestral home. We can go to the little garden. I've planted lots of interesting things. Eno nearly shook his head. Christmas was always awkward for him. Even after more than 10 years in England, he still wasn't comfortable visiting or staying with other people. But he also hated turning down sincere invitations from friends. Neville looked a little crestfallen at Eno's hesitation. Then Eno thought of a way out. Or, why don't you come to my place for Christmas? I bought a house in Hogsmeade. I'll have friends over, though there might be some Slytherins. Neville brightened as if a parched seedling had finally caught rain. That would be great. As for Slytherins, I don't really hate Malfoy. I was just weak and got bullied. Gran says if I don't change, it wouldn't matter whether Malfoy's there. Someone would find a reason to pick on me. As Neville spoke, Eno watched him. When Neville mentioned Malfoy, his face was calm, almost dismissive, like waving away a bothersome insect. It made sense. Lucius had kept a low profile during the worst of the Death Eater years and hadn't made overt enemies. If it had been the Lestranges, Neville might have reacted much more fiercely. Pure-blood families were tangled through intermarriage anyway. Taking everything back to first principles would twist expectations into knots. Then it's settled, Eno said. We'll meet at the 3 Broomsticks in Hogsmeade, and I'll pick you up. 3 Broomsticks? Doesn't your house have a fireplace? Eno froze. The flu. Oh, right. I forgot about the fireplace. He hadn't thought about visiting much before, so details like that slipped his mind. A long rumble rolled across the sky outside the greenhouse. Sorry, Neville. Let's talk later. I need to go. Eno slipped out of the greenhouse. The sound had been thunder, distant but gathering. To the west of the castle, the clouds had drawn together as if an invisible hand had wound a great spring. The sky hung low and heavy as lead, ready to smother the world in gloom. He hurried back toward the castle, wanting to get things ready before dark and to inform Professor McGonagall. As he reached the entrance hall, he found Professor McGonagall standing there with a look of vexed resignation. "I knew it the minute I saw the second-year timetable," she said, part reproach, part relief. "Fetch the potion quickly. I'll be waiting for you at the pier on the east side of the Homping Willow by the Black Lake. Don't rush into anything. Bring the potion to me for inspection first." "Understood, Professor. I'll be right there," Eno said, and hurried into the castle without looking back. Chapter 108, Felix Felicis and Old John the Match. Fourth update. He returned to the Slytherin dormitory. Eno opened the sealed wooden box, took out the animagus potion inside, then picked up the Felix Felicis beside it. Without thinking, he uncorked the bottle and drank it in one gulp. The Felix Felicis slid cool and bright down his throat, like iced mint soda on a scorching summer day. The chill and scent chased away the sultriness, leaving only a clear, refreshing calm. "That feels amazing," he murmured, his mind suddenly lucid and at ease. Perhaps that was Felix Felicis's true nature. When luck favors you, everything moves smoothly. After a moment, he opened his suitcase and from a hidden compartment in his muggle trunk took out a box of old, scorched matches. The box Old John had given him when they parted. Eno had kept it as a keepsake, but under the influence of the Felix Felicis, he felt a faint, insistent urge, as if a voice whispered that those matches would be useful. Outside the castle, the western sky churned with restless clouds. Lightning flickered inside them, brief, ghostly flashes, portents of a coming storm. East of the Homping Willow, by the Black Lake dock, Eno handed the animagus potion to Professor McGonagall. After checking it carefully, she said, "The potion is fine. Drink it when I tell you to, and be sure to pronounce the incantation clearly. That is very important. Do you understand?" Eno nodded solemnly. "Yes, Professor. I'll be careful." He had been preparing for animagus transfiguration for nearly a year. During that time, he'd read countless warnings about the dangers of the magic and the real cases of injury. In the original story, Harry and his friends had been blessed by luck. This, perhaps, was his turn. The wind faded until there was a dull, tense silence. "Get ready. When the first thunder sounds and the potion turns bright red, drink it quickly," Professor McGonagall instructed, wand at the ready. Her voice held a thread of anxiety. She understood better than anyone the hazards of this first transformation. Eno didn't answer. He only nodded and reached into his pocket for the matchbox. Judging by the weight, only about a third of the matches remained. He drew one out and struck it against the phosphorescent strip on the side of the box. Sss! The match flared to life. It wasn't an ordinary flame. It burned like a small, resolute star in the dark, steady, restrained, full of quiet warmth. The light didn't blaze, but it pushed back the darkness and offered a gentle comfort, like a tiny beacon of hope. The flame seemed to tell old stories of love, salvation, endurance. It burned slowly, consuming only a sliver of the match in more than 10 seconds. Under that small glow, Eno felt an unexpected peace. His worries and doubts about the animagus slipped away, replaced by hope. Boom! Thunder cracked across the sky. At once Eno drank the potion, then drew his wand and pointed it at his chest. "Amato animo animato animagus." A moment later, his breathing shuddered. His chest seemed to hold two hearts at once, an outward sign of new life. Inside, however, it felt as if he were being split in two, pain that cut through him, fierce and acute. He tightened his jaw and tried to endure. The match in his hand guttered and went out, but not extinguished in the usual way. A thumb-sized, ghostly flame hovered free in the air, then, for a heartbeat, flew as if alive and merged into him. Everything finished in an instant. The pain receded like a tide. Warmth spread through him, safe and enfolding like a mother's embrace. Eno exhaled, and just as he was about to close his eyes, Professor McGonagall's voice sounded awed. "Merlin, it's truly beautiful," she breathed. "Eno, you've done it. You've completed your animagus transfiguration. You can't speak right now, so listen to me carefully. Don't be afraid or panic. I'm right here." She kept her tone soft and steady, knowing well how the first change could frighten. "Get to know your animagus form now. You'll revert automatically in about an hour or two, and next time you'll be able to control it." She tapped her wand and a full-length mirror shimmered into being on the ground. "Go on, look. Your animagus is beautiful, graceful, and striking." Hearing those words, Ino realized he had succeeded, but the adjectives, beautiful, graceful, lovely, made him nervous. Animagus transfiguration was supposed to aid stealth and mobility, not call attention like a peacock. The mental image of a parade of plumage made him recoil. Still, as McGonagall gestured, he saw his reflection. In the mirror stood a black swan. Its feathers were glossy and ink-dark, its posture elegant and commanding. He knew swans from stories and nature books, large birds roughly 1.2 to 1.6 meters long, with wingspans around 2.5 meters. People admired their grace and often overlooked their abilities. Swans are among the highest-flying birds. Aside from bar-headed geese, they can fly over Mount Everest, able to cruise at altitudes over 9,000 meters. Their normal flight speed ranges from about 75 to 95 kilometers per hour, and they are equally at home on water. Versatile, fast, and capable, far from being a useless, showy bird. In the mirror, the black swan moved with quiet power. The fear that he'd become some gaudy, attention-seeking creature vanished. This form promised speed, endurance, and the freedom to move, everything he needed. Professor McGonagall's face softened with proud relief beside him as the wind began to stir again over the lake. Chapter 109, Animagus and the Path of the Legendary Wizard. Outside Hogwarts Castle, Professor McGonagall stood by the edge of the Black Lake and breathed with relief. "It went more smoothly than I imagined, and it's a rare black swan. You can move now. The lake or the sky is yours. I'll wait here for you to change back." Hearing that, Ino tried to stand. Swans walk on 2 feet, but having an extra pair of wings felt awkward. Still, as the saying went, if you're beautiful, even clumsiness is taken for grace. The same was true of him. Though he wobbled, the black swan's elegant posture and noble bearing turned every stumble into charm. McGonagall almost reached out to steady the lovely wobbling swan, but she stopped herself. This was Ino's first time adapting to his animagus form. Like a child learning to walk, he needed to take this step on his own. After a few tentative steps, Ino slipped and went plop into the Black Lake. He flapped and splashed for a moment, but when he realized he wouldn't sink, he began paddling, delighted. The swan's feathers and webbed feet made him an excellent swimmer. Playing in the water was addictive. 10 minutes later, having completely forgotten McGonagall's presence on the shore, she called out, unable to restrain herself any longer. "The first transformation is about getting used to your body. You're not a fish. How much longer are you going to play? Swans are meant to fly." He straightened at once, embarrassed by how easily animal instincts had taken over. His elegant neck curved. He brushed away a thought of the tabby cat beside him and prepared to attempt flight. He wasn't sure of all the steps a swan needed to take off, but he remembered the lore about 9 steps and 18 flaps, the swan running over the water to gather strength and then launching itself skyward. Under the night, the Black Lake lay like a dark mirror, bathed in pale moonlight. Ripples fanned out as the black swan stretched his neck and beat his wings, 2 strong flaps that broke the lake's stillness. Gradually the body rose, the wings carrying him higher until he traced elegant arcs against the moonlit sky. McGonagall watched from the shore with a satisfied nod. Ino, in midair, discovered that flying came as naturally as swimming had. These were instincts that only needed waking and a short period of adjustment. Freed from the ground, he felt the wind and the exhilaration of unrestrained motion. Hogwarts shrank beneath him. Altitude climbed. He pushed higher than he ever expected. Birds could reach astonishing heights, he thought, recalling that some species fly near the limits of the atmosphere. After the first thrill passed, his mind turned inward. First, he thought of the matchstick, the last relic that old John's daughter had left in the freezing snow. It wasn't merely a keepsake, it had felt miraculous. Perhaps it transcends ordinary magic, he wondered for a moment, then dismissed the thought as extravagant. He hadn't been schooled in the old mysteries enough to make such a claim. Still, The matchstick was the oddest, most powerful thing he'd come across. Even the divination dice Professor Hans had given him, useful as they were, didn't feel as boundless as that tiny, burning flame. If anything matched that quality, it was Dumbledore's one-pointed, boundless love. Though Dumbledore's devotion was directed at a single person, while the matchstick's warmth seemed to hold 1,000 stories and folk tales, a compassion gathered from many hearts across time. From that instance of warmth, his thoughts drifted to Harry Potter, a tale that began with love and ended with love. Voldemort might have found clever ways to avoid protective charms, but in the end, love prevailed. Perhaps it was the lingering effect of the Felix Felicis he'd used. Ideas fell into place with the clarity of a lifted veil. Still, the more he understood, the more questions surfaced. The four houses, the four founders, cleverness, bravery, wisdom, loyalty, each great wizard had carved a unique path. Professor Hans's rejection of greed, Dumbledore's turbulent life, and single-minded devotion, these were choices that had led them to their own identities. So what about my own qualities? He mused. He sighed. Freedom wasn't a virtue in the same way as bravery or wisdom. It was a way of life and an attitude. He had no reason to fit someone else's mold. No legendary wizard, not for thousands of years, had embodied all four founders' traits at once. Dumbledore, for example, had not simply inherited Gryffindor's bravery. He had pushed a path of bravery to its limits and then discovered his own way beyond it. Eno remembered Professor Flitwick's talk about the emotional side of magic and Dumbledore's tempestuous choices, and the pieces began to form a rougher picture, without resolving into answers. The sudden surge of insight faded, leaving a momentary ache of loss, then a brighter feeling. He'd found a correct use for Felix Felicis. The lucky potion wasn't for small-time gambits like a Quidditch match or temporary advantage in a duel. Its true worth was for thinking and learning, providing the nudge, the inspiration, the signposts at a crossroads that let you take the right route with confidence. My dear Professor Snape, Eno thought of his head of house. Whether it was the savage sharpness of Sectum Sempra or Snape's genius with potions, both were singularly effective. If his first animagus experiment hadn't ended so well, he would already be flying back to the castle to find Snape, show his face, and ask to learn how to brew Felix Felicis. Before, he hadn't dared. The look on his face, his standing, might not have been enough to ask. Now, emboldened by what he'd experienced and how far he'd come, he felt he could try. After all, the contests with Draco on the dueling stage had been fair and open. Draco's leg locker had been used in the arena, not a sneak attack, and all had been done in plain sight. That honesty, that willingness to test oneself openly, made Eno want to return, to learn, to refine, and to see where his own path might lead. Slytherin Dormitory. Eno Swinburne moved quietly about the common room, using a water-making charm to rinse the leaves of a potted plant until the emerald foliage gleamed as if lit from within. When he finished watering the flowers, he sat on a nearby chair and let his thoughts wander. The thunderstorm of the first Transfiguration trial was already behind him. Professor McGonagall had said that once students cleared that initial hurdle, controlling an animagus became far easier, almost like an instinct. It wasn't superior skill so much as the nature of the transformation itself. Once the first breath is taken, breathing no longer needs to be learned. His mind drifted to the afternoon's history of magic. Professor Binns had droned on in his usual monotone about the 1752 Goblin Rebellion in England. Even delivered without drama, the tale was brutal. Countless dead, towns burned, families wiped out. In Binns's steady recital, the blood and loss seemed to exist as a flat procession of dates and names, but the horror remained. A tidy, measured knock at the door pulled him back to the present. Draco Malfoy opened it with his customary flourish, and then, behind him, an entire group filed in. Eno counted: Draco, Crabbe, Goyle, Pansy, Daphne Greengrass, and 4 other second-year Slytherin girls. 9 in all, more than half the year for their small house. Draco apologized as he came in. Eno, sorry. There's a lot of us today. It's all right. Good for everyone to study together, Eno said, outwardly casual. He had agreed to help review History of Magic after class. He hadn't expected a small crowd. He waved his wand. 9 tall white chairs of ice shimmered into being, Then he altered them with a quick transfiguration so they looked like ordinary wooden seats. The trick wasn't sheer transfiguration prowess. Manipulating the texture of an object of the same volume was easy for him, and his ice magic made the conjuring straightforward. He didn't realize how much that casual display impressed the others. Pansy and Daphne in particular watched with bright eyes. Draco, of course, had already seen the ice boa before. He was unsurprised. "Please, sit down. We're going to start reviewing what Professor Binns covered today," Eno said softly. No one hesitated. They took their seats and settled in. In class, Binns covered modern history again, specifically the Goblin Rebellion of 1752, he began, his tone calm rather than theatrical. In mid-18th century England, a goblin leader named Ragnuk led a major uprising. The root cause was simple. Goblins had no representation in the Wizengamot. They felt they had no voice, and they lashed out. He kept the narration steady. That rebellion swept across England and claimed countless lives, elders, students, even infants. No one was spared, regardless of blood status. In the goblins' view, wizards are wizards. Distinctions of blood mean little to them, and that lack of regard bred resentment. Ultimately, Minister Albert Boot resigned, and his successor, Basil Flack, lasted only 2 months before stepping down amid unrest and alliances between goblins and werewolves. When he finished, the room was unnervingly quiet. The students sat very still, as if the weight of those years had pressed down on them. After several long moments, Pansy spoke, softly, almost sweetly. "Goblins are untrustworthy. They should be wiped out, every last one." Daphne's voice followed, practical and cold. "They are untrustworthy, yes, but useful. Brand them, control them with magic, treat them like house elves. Useful servants if kept in check." Eno glanced back at Draco, Crabbe, and Goyle. The boys' faces were blank and a little lost. They had heard the words, but not the reasoning behind them. The girls' confidence somehow felt older and sterner than the boys' surprise. "We're here to study history of magic, not to debate policy," Eno said, shifting the conversation before it could go further. "For our purposes, focus on a few key points: the dates of the 3 major goblin rebellions, and the fact that in 1865 the Ministry restored goblin sovereignty over Gringotts as a political move to appease them." Just as he thought the review might wrap up, one of the new girls raised her hand. He recognized her at once, Millicent Bostwick, the burly girl known for her strength and bluntness. "Miss Bostwick?" Eno prompted. "Mr. Swinburne," she said without hesitation, her voice deep and direct. "If goblins rebelled several times and caused so much harm, why did we end up granting them concessions? We clearly defeated them in battle. Was it because wizards were weak, or because the Ministry was incompetent? We won, yet we had to give them benefits." Her question was sharp, and it cut to the heart of the lesson. History was not just a chain of events, but a record of power, compromise, and consequence. Chapter 111, 9 Cute Little Wizards' Dormitory Classroom. When Bosda's question hung in the air, Eno felt a headache coming on. These kids, barely 13 or 14 and still second-year wizards, could dissect problems with such precision that it was hard to imagine what they might become if they kept going like this. Perhaps there was a reason pureblood families dominated the Ministry of Magic, but now was not the time to dwell on that. He needed to answer Bosda's question because it had struck a chord with everyone. Faces turned toward him expectantly. "Cough. Before I answer, let me say something else." Eno cleared his throat. The question had been sharp, but after a moment he had a way to steer things elsewhere. "Do you know that among ordinary birds, only the crow dares to attack an eagle? It will land on the eagle's back and peck at its neck." As he spoke, he conjured an ice eagle and a crow, watching them circle above the desks. The eagle largely ignores the crow. It won't waste energy fighting it. Instead, it spreads its wings and climbs. The higher the eagle flies, the harder it is for the crow to breathe. Eventually, the crow falls away, dying from lack of oxygen. He let the image sink in. "So my suggestion is this. Why exhaust ourselves worrying about goblins or the Ministry of Magic? We're at Hogwarts to learn. Let's get better grades, learn more, and, like the eagle, fly as high as we can. Once we're high enough, a lot of doubts will simply fall away on their own." It was a classic McGonagall move: delay and redirect. Procrastinate for now and hope the quarry is forgotten in a few months. Yes, the ministry might be incompetent, and it was likely that some officials had made secret deals with goblins, pocketing blood-stained galleons, but there was no proof, and even if there were, voicing it would be dangerous. The implications were huge, big enough to ignite another goblin rebellion, spread beyond Britain via Gringotts, and bring down more than just one corrupt official. That was not a fight to pick in a dormitory classroom. Bosdi was about to ask another question, but a soft, sweet voice beside her cut in. Millicent, that's enough. Your question is like a niffler wondering why a dragon breathes fire. Pointless. Daphne's refined tone, combined with her delicate presence, silenced the tall, headstrong Bosdi in an instant. Eno even glimpsed fear in Bosdi's eyes. As the host, seeing the awkward hush, he hurried to smooth things over. All right, that's enough for today's review. Remember to finish your History of Magic homework. Professor Binns assigned it. An hour earlier, 9 young wizards had come into the dormitory. An hour later, 8 left. As they dispersed, Draco couldn't help griping. She asks too many questions. Next time, tell Daphne not to bring her. Forget it, Eno cut him off, then added more patiently. It's not a bad thing. Her questions show she's been listening. Isn't that what review is for? Maybe. I just don't like her. Draco gave his frank opinion, then stopped gossiping and asked a practical question. Eno, I'm heading to Quidditch practice later. You coming? Sorry, Draco. I'm beat. I need to sleep. Eno strode to his bed, dropped the heavy curtain around it, and vanished behind it in one smooth motion. Draco glanced at the closed curtains and muttered something, then picked up a broom that hovered nearby and left for the pitch. Sanctuary. An ice-slicked path. The real reason Eno had been so eager to get into bed was not tiredness, but a return of a feeling he hadn't had in 5 months, a long-lost flutter that made his chest ache with longing. He grabbed his suitcase, slung his accordion over his shoulder, cast a last look at the thriving ice flowers, and walked briskly to the end of the path. He ignored the ice frost python, which had wrapped itself in another loop and seemed more agile than before. There simply wasn't time to deal with it. The path of red maple leaves to the wood elves was shrouded in thick mist. Beyond it, the fog thinned and revealed a country lane. Through the veil of mist, Eno found himself on a narrow rural road only 3 or 4 meters wide, with weeds growing along both sides. At the end of the road, a small town lay quiet in the distance. It must have rained recently. The lane was muddy, carriage tracks gored into the surface, and the ground was dotted with animal droppings. Eno glanced down at his new boots, then at the town. He set his jaw and stepped into the black, soft mud. He walked for about a quarter of an hour. The town that unfolded was straight out of a medieval Western story. Staggered timber and stone houses, heavy thatched roofs, hand-woven curtains fluttering at the windows. At the town center stood an old church, modest in size, no more than a few dozen square meters, with rough stone walls and weathered mortar. There were no elaborate carvings, only a handful of narrow windows fitted with a few colored glass panes. Despite its simplicity, the church convinced Eno he had made the right choice in not using magic to avoid the mud. In stories like this, magic and wizards were rarely viewed kindly. Discretion could be prudent. The town itself was surprisingly lively. Bakers' apprentices in brown aprons kneaded dough, a shirtless blacksmith hammered steadily, tavern owners shouted to passing customers, carts and caravans crowded the open ground. Now he understood why the townsfolk hadn't paid him much mind when he entered. This was a typical relay town on a trade route. Such settlements often began as little more than a well and an inn, but with frequent caravans they grew into clusters of tailors, blacksmiths, bakers, churches, and the like. The people here didn't rely on farming alone. They made their living serving travelers and trading with passing merchants, a balanced, self-sustaining cycle that had formed over time. Chapter 112, Shankytown. On the open ground beside the town, Eno paused to take in his surroundings before heading toward the bakery. If he had been older, he would have gone to the tavern first to gather information. But despite his sudden growth spurt this year, he was now about 1.6 meters tall. His face was still boyish. In a crowded place like this, a half-grown youth barging into a tavern was neither wise nor safe. Across the street, the bakery owner Payne was hard at work. He dumped a scoop of coarse, grainy flour into a yellowed wooden basin, fetched a bucket of murky water, and began kneading with practiced motions. His hands moved on autopilot, but his eyes never stopped watching the caravans and unfamiliar faces moving through town. That morning he'd noticed someone new, a traveler whose age, fine clothes, and beautiful accordion caught his attention. At first glance, the gray robe looked plain, but Payne recognized the weave as too fine for ordinary folk. Even Sophia, the wealthiest tavern owner in Town, owned only one similarly fine printed dress, and she wore it only for the harvest festival. Payne's mind immediately began to race. He'd managed to run his own bakery before 20 by being shrewd and opportunistic. Bread alone would only keep him fed. To make real money, he catered to the well-dressed travelers who visited the town for curiosities and stories. A finely dressed bard could be a gold mine. Eno walked into the small shop. The only person inside was the young baker, and Eno noted the same shrewd look in his eyes he'd seen in Flint. That was promising. Mercenary and profit-driven people could be more useful than smooth-talking flatterers. "Excuse me, sorry to bother you," Eno said as he approached. "How much are your loaves? They look tempting." He forced the compliment out of habit, though the dark, pitted breads with stray hairs in them were hardly appetizing. Payne spread his hands. "They're not worth much. I doubt you could eat them." He swore to the harvest goddess that if the boy opposite him could manage a bite, he would give up a year's income. "If you're really hungry, go to the tavern across the street. Miss Sophia's grilled steak is famous in Town." "Oh, I'm new here. This is my first time in Town. I'm a wandering bard," Eno said, seizing the opening when Payne mentioned the tavern. "A bard?" Payne's face fell. Bards were rarely wealthy. Then he brightened. Another idea hit him. "Do you want to hear tales about Town? Then you can tell them to others. One story, 2 copper coins." "All right, begin." Eno drew 2 copper coins from his pocket and set them on the bread counter. Old John's gold coins were gone, but he still had some silver and copper left. Half an hour later, after handing over 12 copper coins, Eno had a better sense of the place. Payne's short, well-spun accounts painted a bigger picture. A vast world with limitless lands, countless cities and kingdoms, a place full of stories. Elves in the forests, devils in the wastes, witches in ruined towers, merfolk legends by the sea. There was no shortage of tales. When he left the bakery, Eno walked straight to the open ground where carriages were parked. In a world like this, you couldn't expect to leave quickly if you weren't already part of a story. People could linger for weeks or months. He needed work, not only to move on, but to fill his pockets. His few remaining silver coins wouldn't last long on tavern rent. Under the curious gazes of traveling merchants, Eno unstrapped his accordion. Bards had many tricks to gather a crowd. Some scattered sand to form a ring, others beat bamboo clappers, some performed acrobatics. The goal was the same: get enough attention so a story would pay. If only a couple of people stayed, one leaving could ruin the earnings. He played a few minutes and then, when a decent crowd had formed, began to sing. In the distant misty mountains, hidden among the peaks, lies a secret kingdom. In its halls are piles of treasure, endless gold and jewels, and that wealth drew the covetous eye of a wicked dragon. He laid out the theme and then slipped into a flashback to draw them in. That dragon was called Smog. He seized the dwarves' horde. The brave dwarf Prince Thorn gathered warriors and set out to reclaim their home. As the tale unfolded, the circle grew. When he reached the moment, the dwarves entered the lonely mountain and stood at the threshold of the beast. Eno paused. He bowed to the listeners, spread a square of linen on the ground, and let the custom speak for him. Travelers who wanted to hear paid willingly, dropping copper onto the cloth. Those who wished to leave did so politely. A clear chime rang out as a gold coin glanced across the linen. Eno looked up, surprised. A young man with thick glasses and a mature face had made the payment. Seeing Eno's puzzled look, he explained, "I like your story, but I think you've left out a lot. I'll pay you. Please tell me the complete tale later in private. I want to record it in my collection." "Oh, and let's introduce ourselves," the man added. "I'm William Grimm. I'm an adventurer and a novelist." Chapter 113, Brothers Grimm. In a small tavern in Town, at a corner table, Eno stared at the 2 young men opposite him. They looked strikingly alike, and even though he'd had time to accept it, a part of him still found it hard to believe. On this strange journey, meeting the Grimm brothers in person felt like a fan encounter. Their names carried weight in every fairy tale and folk story he'd ever known, and here they were, sitting across from him. The elder, William Grimm, wore thick glasses and had a steady air about him. His face was a little dark but lively, and he hunched over a desk, copying stories into a thick notebook. The younger Jacob Grimm was all energy, tall and straight as a birch, eyes bright with excitement. Seeing them, Eno couldn't help but replay what had happened half an hour before. He'd been invited to the tavern after finishing his retelling of The Hobbit because William wanted to record the tale. William produced a 3-inch thick notebook, and Eno, true to his word, had described the background, origins, and thrilling plot of the story in detail. He spoke steadily and deliberately, but astonishingly, William's handwriting kept pace with him. He had been narrating for a full half hour when William suddenly stopped and said, "Thank you, but I need to rest my wrist for a moment." William flexed his hand. High-speed copying had clearly taken its toll. Jacob's eyes lit up. "That was wonderful. I haven't heard a story like that in ages. I really hope I can go to Middle-earth someday." Eno smiled and shook his head. "Then you're destined not to go. That world is far from here." Jacob was only a few years older than Eno, open earnest, a young man Eno liked immediately. Jacob just shrugged. "I know. You and my brother are masters at inventing tales." William's brow knit. "Jacob, mind your manners," he scolded gently. He felt Jacob's bluntness went too far. Even if a tale was invented, it shouldn't be exposed so plainly. Eno waved a hand. "We're colleagues in a way. Stories sometimes need embellishment to hold an audience. If you tell everything strictly by the facts, it won't be as captivating." William nodded. "True, people today won't believe the strange things and find the ordinary boring. It's hard being a storyteller." Curious, Eno asked, "Have you run into many strange things yourselves? Is it dangerous?" He had pictured the Grimm brothers as ordinary men, so he wondered how they'd survived any real danger. Jacob answered first. "We have. It's dangerous sometimes, but I love the thrill." Eno expected William to contradict him, but William only agreed, smiling. "No wonder you called yourselves adventurers first, then writers." "You're only talking about my brother," Jacob protested. He reached into his boot, pulled out a silver dagger, and said, "I'm not just a writer. I'm an adventurer and an exorcist." William's face fell. "Jacob, no weapons in Shanktown. Did you forget you were confined by the mayor for 3 days last time because of this?" Jacob hastily slid the dagger back into his boot and looked down like a chastised child. William turned to Eno and apologized. "Sorry, Jacob's impulsive. He got into trouble for drawing his weapon before." Eno laughed and shook his head. "It's fine. I couldn't see clearly. Was that a silver quill?" That small joke, gentle and absurd, loosened the air between them. Jacob looked up, and the three exchanged smiles. They ate at a corner table, 3 plates of fragrant grilled steak, some candies, and dried cheese. William had paid for the steak. The rest came from Eno's suitcase. After the meal, they leaned back, pleasantly stuffed, Eno from the steak, the brothers from the rare luxury of candy. In a world with medieval standards, sugar was a treat. "Once I'm a legendary adventurer, I'll give you a silver quill," Jacob promised with mouth full of candy. "I'll wait for that day," Jacob went on. "When William's stories are printed, I'll be the first to buy a copy, and you both must sign it, the Grimm brothers' signatures." Eno relaxed into his chair. "You won't have to buy it. I'll give you a copy. You're the first person to believe we could be legends. Everyone else thinks we're neglecting our duties." William listened, serious. Time passed the way it always does. Eno stayed in Shanktown for 7 days. By day, he went to the small square outside town, where merchants left their carriages and told stories. At night, he returned to the tavern to sit with the Grimm brothers. Conversations there mostly meant Eno telling tales and William writing them down, while Jacob amused himself and asked for sweets. After finishing the last battle, the 7th Narnia book, Eno lifted a glass of raspberry mead and wetted his lips. "Another wonderful story. I feel a little guilty hearing so many of your stories for free." William sighed and set down his quill. Eno waved him off. "It's fine. We agreed it's on account." Over the week, Eno had learned the brothers had very little money. Their part-time work as exorcists brought in some coin, but not enough. hunger was common. That gold coin William had produced on the first day had likely been his last. After a pause, William looked at Eno and asked quietly, "Eno, do you believe in magic? I mean true magic, not the dark sorceries of witches and devils." The tavern was dim and full of smoke, and William's voice brushed against Eno like a sudden, cool breeze. "So, is there a difference?" he asked, curious as he tried to absorb the new information. "The difference is huge," Jacob said from his corner, his tone precise and a little theatrical. "Wizards are esteemed guests at court, sage men whom kings vie to invite. Witches and demons who dabble in dark arts are creatures of the shadows, like filthy crawling things that cannot stand the light. True wizards are rare," he continued. "I've only seen one in my life. They are learned, exceptionally wise, often living in seclusion, quietly studying in dusty libraries. Many even think wizards are only legends." At Jacob's words, Eno's hand moved automatically to the wand tucked in his sleeve. The week living in this medieval world had been a trial. No proper bathing, streets caked with filth. In Shankytown, horse and mule droppings lay everywhere, fresh and dry mixed together, and the stench had been almost unbearable. "If you believe in magic, that makes things simpler," William said, sounding relieved. He leaned in. "I could pay you for your stories in another way, by giving you some magic beans." Before he could finish, Jacob cut in. "Oh, come on, brother. That's not right. You were tricked, so don't turn around and trick Eno. That isn't fair." William flushed, stumbling for a reply. That isn't a trick." His voice dwindled. "Fine, Jacob. You might be right." He sighed, then turned back to Eno. "Put the cost of the stories on my tab for now. I'll pay you when I have coin." William stopped talking about the beans, but Eno's curiosity was already piqued. He had read many tales of magic beans. He wanted to know exactly what kind William had. "Money isn't the issue," Eno said. "What I really want to know is, what are these magic beans?" William's face took on a wistful look. "I got them from a forest elf I met on an adventure. She said they were blessed by the harvest goddess. If the seeds sprout, they'll grow into an oak 3 feet tall." He produced a small wooden box from his pocket and set it on the table. Inside were a handful of slightly yellow pea-like seeds. "Plant one, and once the oak grows, every harvest festival countless gold coins will appear on its branches," he said. "People can enjoy the bounty of the harvest." Jacob snorted. "They never sprouted. And are you sure you didn't snack on some? There's only this much left. Last time I saw, there was half a bag." Eno watched the brothers with a slight smile. After a moment, he said, "William, I'm very interested in these beans, but I should be clear up front." He thought of Teacher Hans and the path he'd been expected to follow. He didn't want to simply replicate someone else's route. He wanted to try a different path, an exchange that was fair and transparent. "I'm a magic apprentice," Eno said. "These beans might be real, but I need to take them back to my teacher to examine. Will you still pay for the stories with them?" At that, both Grimm brothers looked up. Jacob's eyes brightened like a sunrise through mist, but he didn't interrupt. He glanced at William as if waiting to see what his brother would do. William, the well-traveled older brother, paused, then smiled. "I expected you weren't just an ordinary traveler," he admitted. "At first, I thought you might be of noble birth." He pushed the wooden box across the table. "I'll agree to the trade. Even if they do sprout gold, in my hands they're just snack beans." Eno didn't take the whole box. He pinched out 3 beans and held them up. "Fair trade. I'll take only 3. 3 stories in return. Narnia, Pirates of the Caribbean, and The Lord of the Rings. The rest of the short tales are on the house." Jacob brightened. "Eno, tell me about wizards, please. I'm really curious." He'd said earlier he'd once seen one, but it was only from a distance at a king's coronation. He hadn't known which figure was the wizard. As Eno opened his mouth to begin, a loud bang cut through the tavern. The door was thrown open. A burly man with walnut-sized nostrils pushed inside, followed by 5 oddly dressed companions, some with arms as thick as tree trunks, others in leather caps despite the summer heat. "That's Crew's Caravan," Jacob murmured in Eno's ear. "They're famous around here. My brother even wrote a tale about them. 6 Men Travel the World." The title flashed in Eno's mind, a memory of the first storybook he'd loved as a child. Then Crew, seeing every eye in the room upon him, boomed out loud enough to fill the tavern. Strange things are happening in Kellentown, he announced. In broad daylight, a horse swallowed a little girl. By the time anyone realized, the horse's belly was as big as a water vat. That's not the only oddity. Many strange things have been happening in that little town. Jacob and William exchanged looks that said everything. An adventure was calling. Strange, eerie events like these made for good stories and often earned handsome fees for exorcism or investigation. The Grimm brothers' interest had already tipped from curiosity to intent. Chapter 115, Ruined Tower in the Forest, Kellentown. An old carriage rolled through the main street and pulled up at the curb. 3 young people stepped out of the battered compartment. Eno fished a silver coin from his pocket and handed it to the coachman, then took in the strange town before him. Beside him stood the Grimm brothers, who did not hurry inside but paused at the town's edge to observe. They had left the tavern the night before, after hearing Kuru's description. Unlike the Grimm brothers, who chased adventure and coin, Eno wanted only to witness things firsthand to expand his repertoire of stories. As a bard, seeing events from myth alongside the legendary Grimm brothers was irresistible, and his confidence came from real strength. If he'd met something like this in the past, his first thought would have been escape, not curiosity. Beyond the town, a haze hung like an endless curtain, the clouds low and roiling, as if they might collapse on the settlement at any moment. "Something's wrong here," William said, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose. Jacob, beside him, quietly drew a silver dagger from his boot. The blade gave a faint, holy glow, weak but unmistakably sacred. Eno raised his wand and cast a revelio, a detection spell aimed at the dark arts, but it revealed nothing. "Something's wrong, but my magic can't detect it." "Don't worry, I'm here." Jacob tightened his grip on the dagger. The restless kid who'd been munching candy in the tavern was gone. He stood transformed, alert, sharp, and ready. Eno didn't lower his guard. He wasn't the legendary protagonist the Grimm brothers were. Some things still called for caution. He muttered, "Protego horribilis," and set up a defensive charm, then stepped back with his wand at the ready. "Let's go in and gather information first," William said, glancing up at the oppressive sky. He turned to Jacob. "Put your weapon away. It's not time to use it yet." They moved into Kellentown. The place looked half abandoned. Most houses were low stone cottages, walls choked with moss and vines, doors and shutters were tightly closed. Every passerby wore the same clouded expression. "Let's split up," William suggested. "Eno, you go with Jacob." William was uneasy about the boy who claimed to be a magic apprentice. Eno had only carried a wand and muttered as they traveled. William hadn't seen him cast a spell yet. Just as they prepared to separate, a piercing scream cut across the town. The 3 exchanged looks and ran toward the sound. By the well, a little girl with no face stumbled along, stumbling as if someone had ripped away her features. Behind her hopped a humanoid creature of mud, trailing her like an unquiet puppet. Dozens had gathered, swinging farm tools, sickles, rakes at the thing, but blows at its muddy body did little besides slow it. On closer inspection, the mud-formed creature's face held delicate, familiar features. Paired with the faceless girl, the truth came into sharp focus. "Petrificus totalis!" Eno shouted. White light flared from his wand, and the mud creature froze, marble veins forming across its surface. Within moments, it had become a statue. Villagers murmured in startled voices. "Magician? Exorcist? Dark arts?" Before Eno could explain, Jacob stepped forward, drew his silver dagger, and drove it into the center of the petrified chest. With a ringing crack, the statue shattered into chips of stone. The faceless girl staggered, then gasped as her features snapped back into place. "Mom!" she cried. A middle-aged woman with a sickle in her hand rushed forward and wrapped her arms around the child. Later, inside the girl's humble home, the 3 listened as the mother spoke. She introduced herself as Emily. Unlike most farm women, she sounded worldly and literate. She didn't shrink from the terrible facts. "We don't know what's happening," she said, "but people say it's tied to the ruined tower in the forest." "This is the 9th strange incident in 6 months," Emily went on, her voice thin with fear. "Each time it's a little girl, about 10 years old. I'm taking my daughter away. This town, it's cursed." William asked about the ruined tower. Emily stood and fetched a yellowed notebook from a corner shelf. "This belonged to my father. He was the pastor. The records are in here." She opened the notebook and handed it over. William read while Eno and Jacob listened. The notebook told the old story. 100 years earlier, a witch coveted a princess's beauty and sent crows to seize the princess, imprisoning her in a high tower. A brave soldier discovered the imprisonment and climbed the tower to meet the princess in secret. Their affair was discovered. The soldier killed the witch but died from his wounds. Grief-stricken, the princess went mad, turned to the dark arts the witch had left behind, and tried to raise the soldier from death. The church sent a small band of exorcists to deal with the corruption. Emily's father was one of them. They sealed the evil in the tower and believed the matter settled. Now, however, the seals have clearly failed. The same pattern repeating. Girls stripped of their faces, the mud creatures formed and sent outward. The ruined tower in the forest was the most likely source. They sat in uneasy silence, the notebook's pages rustling like a small, stubborn wind. The mist outside the window seemed to press closer. Whatever had been sealed a century ago was stirring again. Chapter 116, Tower in the Forest. It was their second day in Kellentown. At the edge of the forest, dappled light and shadow wrapped everything in a dim, wavering glow. Eno watched the impatient Grimm brothers with a helpless look. Just yesterday, after they rescued the little girl from the mud monster, the mayor had hired the three of them for 15 gold coins to investigate the town's strange occurrences. They'd only done a preliminary look and didn't even know where the tower was. Yet early this morning, the Grimm brothers were already eager to push into the woods. The forest before them was full of twisted, grotesque trees whose branches looked like limbs that had endured endless pain. The bark was cracked and mottled, as if time itself had torn at it, revealing ugly, rotted wood beneath. There was no bird song, no insect noise, not even a breeze. Everything was ominously still. Eno gripped his wand and peered into the uncanny gloom. "William, Jacob, are you sure you want to go now? We haven't even figured out which way to go." William pulled a short dagger from his boot and answered with a shrug. "I know, but we don't have a choice. This happened 100 years ago. Emily doesn't know, and the others know even less. There's no one we can ask." Jacob, standing nearby, nodded. This clearly wasn't the first time the brothers had faced a situation like this. Seeing them about to push into the deep forest, Eno took a breath. "Wait here. I'll get up and scout from the sky." With that, he leapt, his body shifting in an instant into an elegant, mysterious black swan. The swan's broad, dark wings caught a blue sheen in the sunlight. 2 powerful beats later, by the time the Grimm brothers had blinked, the black swan had broken free of the trees and climbed more than 10 meters into the air. From above, Eno surveyed the forest. The area was larger than he'd thought. With no clues on the ground, he flew higher. Higher meant a farther view. He spiraled upward until the forest below shrank to a pattern of trunks and gaps. Then a patch of difference appeared to the southwest, a gray, desolate clearing like a leaf chewed through by some great insect. He headed that way. It took about 15 minutes to reach the clearing. The ground there was gray-brown and bare of plants. In the center stood a tall, ruined tower. Its spire had collapsed, but the shaft still rose. Using the 3 to 4 meter tall grotesque willows around the clearing as reference, Eno estimated the tower at about 100 meters tall. He dropped to a low glide and took in the decaying structure. The tower's stone looked corroded, pitted and uneven, draped with withered vines like the dry veins of a dead arm. The whole place radiated a graveyard chill. 12 massive coffins were arranged in a neat circle around the tower. They were made of a black material he didn't recognize, etched with strange, curling patterns. The layout matched the 12-hour marks of a clock, as if whatever cursed this place measured time itself. From above, it looked like an enormous, abandoned clock face. Only a center and markings remained, no hands to show the hour. As he watched, Eno felt, faintly, as if a pair of invisible eyes were observing him. The feeling made his feathers lift. He didn't linger. Once he had a clear picture, he climbed back up and retraced his path. The clearing's air felt oppressive, and the sense of being watched did not fade. At the forest's edge, William and Jacob sat on the ground. William was bent over a thick notebook, writing carefully. Jacob was idly whittling a branch with the silver short sword. After a while, he tossed the stick aside. Don't you think he's mysterious? Haven't we seen enough mysteries? William snapped without looking up, continuing to write. Do you think he's dangerous? Jacob sprang to his feet. No, Eno's a good person. He wouldn't trick us. I know that. William shut the notebook and chuckled. Exactly. Everyone has secrets. We're friends. Respect that. Don't pry. They didn't finish the argument. A black shape descended from the sky and 3 feet above the ground folded into a young man. I found the tower, southwest, Eno reported. It's strange, the clearing and the tower, and 12 coffins. The missing girls are probably in those coffins. We have to reach it before dark. William produced a small nautical compass, set a bearing, and led the way into the forest. They wound through the labyrinth of trees. William walked in front with the compass. Eno and Jacob followed. For some reason, whether the compass or luck, the path through the dense wood was surprisingly straightforward. 2 hours later, the tower rose above the tree line in the distance. Stop, William called, putting away the compass and assuming a defensive stance. The sky darkened as hundreds of crows swarmed above them. They circled in ragged spirals, their cries sharp and piercing. Someone doesn't want us to approach the tower, Jacob said, raising the silver short sword. The blade flashed bright and clean. The crows, as if recognizing a natural enemy, hesitated. They didn't dive at them with full force, but neither did they disperse. They kept circling. Using the lull, the 3 hurried to the base of the tower. Up close, it was even more forbidding. Over 100 meters of stone and no stairs, no obvious way up. William turned to Eno. Can you get us up there? We've found the source of the curse. If Jacob can plunge the short sword into the witch's heart, maybe the curse will break. In a way, if you're not afraid of the cold, I can get you up, Eno said, glancing around. Despite his words, a prickle of unease ran down his spine. The whole trip had been unnaturally smooth, as if the forest had guided them here. Even the crows felt wrong. They weren't blocking so much as pointing, their presence almost like a sign that said silently, Look, this is the place. The 3 stood at the tower's foot under the cawing sky, the 12 black coffins waiting in their clock-like circle, and the windless hush pressed close as if the world itself were holding its breath. Below the high tower, Eno's mind raced. Something felt off, but he had no proof, so he could only take it step by step and get into the tower first. If things went wrong, he could always use animagus or the last resort teleport. He'd learned that magic to flee, after all. For now, the priority was to get inside. The tower stood alone, its only entrance a narrow window at the very top, barely large enough for one person. Seeing William tense, Eno waved his elder wand and called, Winter is coming. Snowflakes fell from the sky, but they didn't scatter randomly. They seemed to have a purpose, gathering around the tower. The snow collected and folded itself into a spiral staircase, climbing the outside of the tower. You 2 follow me, and watch your step. Under the stunned gazes of the Grimm brothers, Eno stepped onto the packed snow. With each footfall, the soft powder beneath him hardened into clear ice, forming the stairs as he went. Eno took the lead, shaping the way. Jacob held his short, glowing sword in the middle to keep watch for threats. William brought up the rear. With that simple division of labor, they climbed for half an hour and reached the top. The window was narrow and seemed enchanted against light. The room inside was black. Wait, I'll go first, Jacob said. He grabbed Eno's sleeve, then pushed his glowing short sword through the window to make sure it was safe. Finding nothing hostile, Jacob leaped inside. Eno felt a chill run down his spine. He had been foolish to step in without reconnoitering first. There's a room. You can come in now. Eno followed. The chamber was larger than it had looked from outside. Jacob's sword cast a faint glow, but it didn't reach every shadow. The light wavered as Jacob moved. Sunshine, reappear, Eno commanded. A small orb of warm orange light floated into the air like a tiny sun and illuminated the room. The furnishings were lavish, every detail crafted with courtly taste. For a moment, they were all distracted by the luxury, until their eyes fell on the bed at the center. On it lay a mummified corpse, skin shrunken and leathery like dried bark, but it breathed, each heave a rasping, heavy gasp. William drew a stone pen from his pocket and traced a circle on the floor around the bed, inscribing strange sigils along its edge. When he finished, Jacob, without hesitation, thrust his glowing short sword into the mummy's chest. The blade flared with blinding light. The thing gave a sound like a venting bellows, and within seconds it crumbled into a heap of ash. Outside, the flock of crows that had circled the tower scattered and fled. "So that's it? That's all?" Eno muttered, scanning the room again. The oppressive feeling he'd had outside now seemed almost anticlimactic. Just draw a circle and stab the thing. The contrast unnerved him. A voice, sweet and clear as a bell, drifted through the room. "Of course it's over. You killed the old witch, didn't you, my lovely little swan?" Bang! Bang! Two dull impacts cut her off. Eno blinked. The Grimm brothers were already knocked off their feet, wrapped in silk and suspended midair in a grotesque pose. From the full-length mirror on the wall, a woman stepped out. She was stunning. A princess gown that floated like clouds, perfectly chiseled features, pale porcelain skin, a high nose, and violet eyes. She was almost unfairly beautiful. "The scent of a curse," she breathed, lapping her lips with delight. "You're a lovely boy, but why did you hit me, my heartless little swan? I left the window open for you, just so I could see you fly in." The scene had gone off script. Eno didn't wait for her to finish. He raised his wand and cast two of the most destructive dark art spells he knew. Sectum Sempra, Sectum Sempra. The mirror took the blows like an invisible shield. Hairline cracks spidered outward, then raced across the glass until the mirror shattered with a loud crash. Shards tinkled across the floor, but the woman had already stepped through to the other side of where the mirror had been. As she spoke, spiders swarmed from the frame and the window sealed with a thick web. "Heh, you are so cute," she sung, amused. With their escape blocked, Eno changed tactics and sent two slashes of cutting magic at the silk holding the Grimm brothers. The spells cleaved the silk cleanly, but it resealed as though alive. The magic had no lasting effect. Eno turned his wand toward the woman. "All right, you must be the source of the curse, the princess supposedly abducted by the witch. Everyone was deceived by you, including the church's exorcists." The woman bowed with mock grace. "That's right. Call me Princess Olivia." Her curtsy was perfect. "As for the exorcists, where were they when I was taken? I was imprisoned here for 10 years. Where were they then?" Her voice stayed calm, but her violet eyes flashed pure hatred. "Ha! When I killed the witch and tried to escape, the exorcists arrived. Like divine soldiers, 15 men, well-equipped, experienced." Eno watched her without expression, nodding as if hearing an alternate version of events. One hand slipped into his inner pocket. He closed his fingers around an irregular die and a small box of matches, his emergency device. If he was mortally wounded while clutching the die, it would teleport him to Hans's side before the damage completed. It could be used only once, but it was worth the price. His ace in the hole against any truly fatal threat. Chapter 118, Black Swan Magician. A sunlight spell hovered quietly at the top of the tower, casting a steady, clear light over the room. The brightness only made the decay more obvious. Eno relaxed a little, the die still clutched in his hand. Even if the situation had slipped beyond what he could handle, at worst, it would just cost him some items. As long as his life wasn't at stake, he could live with that. "Whatever you've done, you don't need to look like you're facing a fearsome enemy," he said. Olivia glanced around the ruined chamber. Regret softened her violet eyes, and she sighed. "Be glad you're not an exorcist. You wouldn't have been able to stand here if you were. I once saw a magician in the palace." "We're not exorcists, we're writers." Eno seized the moment to state who they were. "The three of us will leave now. This is a misunderstanding. I'm sorry, but you can't go." Olivia's tone was polite and final. "There are 3 girls missing. If I don't finish this quickly, they'll find out. I'll have to use you 3 as substitutes. Once the ritual is complete, I'll let you go." 3 girls missing. Eno's mind jumped to the 12 coffins outside the tower and the 9 strange incidents Emily had mentioned in town. The Grimm brothers, and he had come along to make up the numbers. Naive extras pressed into a plot they hadn't understood. And Olivia's promise to release them after the ritual rang hollow. No resurrection in any story had ever released its sacrifice. "Please, you really can't let us go?" Eno murmured, glancing at the Grimm brothers, who were tightly bound. He regretted all the spells he'd never learned, killing curse, apparition, and more. With magic alone, he felt helpless. You really can't leave, Olivia said softly, although I like you very much. She faltered. Sizzle. A match flared in the dim room. Eno had already put his wand away. He gripped the die with one hand and struck a match with the other. After Sectum Semper had failed, he'd realized magic alone wouldn't touch someone versed in the dark arts. He couldn't afford to waste the die, so he put his faith in old John's matches. There were still a third of them left. Worth a try, he thought. He tossed the match onto Olivia's robe. The flame caught immediately. It was a small, almost saintly flame, but flame is flame. It burned. Eno didn't hesitate. He lunged at Olivia, piling his weight on her, wrapping his arms and legs around her to hold her still. No, you're insane. Let go, please. Take your 2 followers and leave. Olivia screamed, struggling. Eno ignored her cries. He hugged her tightly, even as the fabric blazed through, feeling the heat sear at them both. He was gambling that he could force whatever release he needed before the burns finished him. Otherwise, he'd only have wasted his precious die. The pain came fast and sharp, making his vision swim. Time blurred, seconds stretched into an indeterminate span. Eventually, the struggling under his arms stilled. He slowly loosened his grip. A faint image hovered at the edge of his senses. In winter cold, a barefoot little girl holding a match spoke, though Eno couldn't catch her words through the pain. The girl's face drooped, as if she noticed he couldn't hear. Beside the girl, another figure formed, Olivia, but her violet eyes were gone, replaced by a pair of sapphirine eyes, clear and pure. She bowed to him gently. Then, as quietly as mist, she and the little girl dissolved into the air. Eno closed his eyes. He opened them to the warm dimness of Sophia's little tavern in Shanke Town. He lay on a bed, his body swathed in bandages like a mummy. "You're finally awake. Thank goodness," Jacob exclaimed, leaning over him. "Eno, you saved me and William. We couldn't speak at the time, but we saw everything. Thank you." Jacob's smile was bright, and then he lowered his voice conspiratorially. "Actually, I read William's story in secret. He wrote it already, before going into the forest. The title was Black Swan Magician." The name hit Eno like a thunderclap. Suddenly, everything fell into place. The story that had seemed beyond his scope, the way the Grimm brothers had been subdued so easily, Olivia's ritual, and the odd connections to the coffins and the missing girls. The protagonist of the whole thing had been one all along, Black Swan Magician. Chapter 119, Treatment and Gains of the Protagonist. Sophia's tavern sat like a jewel in the heart of old Shanke Town, its faded sign and warm windows a small promise of comfort. The guest rooms, tucked away in quiet corners, were a haven for tired merchants. The light in the room was soft and dim. On a bed of rough linen and straw, Eno dabbed Dittany essence over his skin and let his thoughts run over the last few days. A week had passed since the Kellen Town Tower incident. He had been unconscious that whole time and only fully regained awareness this morning. Thanks to his wizard physiology and the potions he'd been given, even severe burns had completely healed. Much had changed while he slept. Kellen Town's curse had been lifted. The Grimm brothers had found the missing girls in the sarcophagus, unharmed but unconscious, and the whole affair seemed to have reached its end. Eno rose and slipped into a plain linen robe hanging by the bed. His custom robe, refined and elegant, had been burned beyond recognition. In hindsight, he was oddly grateful he'd thrown away his wand at the last moment. On the small shelf by the bed sat the things the Grimm brothers had recovered for him while he was out: his wand, a set of dice, and a small wooden box William had given him. The box contained slightly less than half a jar of magic beans. But the 3 beans he'd once carried in his pocket had been consumed by the flames, and old John's matches had all been used. This box, however, he accepted without guilt. A man who had paid so much already, and whose story had pushed him to survive, could take a modest reward. After all, protagonists in stories find themselves spared certain consequences. Aladdin ends up with a lamp of wishes, Ali Baba with a thieves' hoard. In stories, what the protagonist gains can seem perfectly reasonable. He looked out the window. Evening had settled over Shanke Town, and the market wagons were stabled. Merchants had retreated to the tavern in small groups, chatting about trade, while a few attendants kept watch over the square. Eno picked up his wand and almost casually said, "Incendio." A bronze oil lamp on the table flared to life with a faint, steady flame, throwing a circle of warmth across the room. But what held his attention wasn't the lamp. He lowered his wand and watched the tip for a long time. Then, again, incendio. This time the flame that rose was not the roaring blaze he remembered from before. It was restrained and deep, steadier than fear, steadier than triumph, more like a flame of hope and redemption, the same quiet burn from old John's matches. Time seemed to fold back to last summer by the Thames, to the way light and shadow had made the bridge arch glow in alternating waves. He had learned the fire-making spell first after receiving his wand and had played with it for hours. Later, after entering Hogwarts and learning more complicated magic, incendio had become only a tool for lighting hearths. Tonight it felt miraculous again, not ordinary fire, but a private, resolute light. He murmured to himself, a realistic version of a song of ice and fire, huh? After a moment, he puzzled out why the flame had changed. Two conditions seemed essential: burning through all the matches in a single instant, and using the spark to set himself alight to save others. Above both of those, though, lay the hidden condition, being the protagonist. Without that narrative protection, such an act would have been pure self-sacrifice. Fortunately, things had gone the other way. Seeing how his fire-making spell had altered, Eno thought of Dumbledore's water prison magic in the fountain at the Ministry and of the later grander path of the fire god, both examples of elemental transfiguration and advanced applications of incendio. Outside, the sky over Shanghai town had deeply darkened without them noticing. Eno extinguished the lamp and pushed the window open. A soft sound and an elegant black swan glided into view above the town, its silhouette almost indistinguishable from the night. As the story's protagonist, he had to tidy up the battlefield and claim the spoils. Such treatment, this kind of providence, was rare. To meet the person who wrote stories inside a story and to be written as the protagonist felt like a once-in-a-lifetime fluke. Unless he happened to encounter Hans Christian Andersen and win his goodwill next time, he suspected this kind of favor wouldn't come again. The black swan hung in the ink-black sky like a living shadow. Its feathers seemed made of night itself, so seamless with the darkness that it almost vanished against it. Each beat of its wings stirred the air and then left it still, like an invisible chalk line across the sky. An hour later, Eno flew toward the tower. From above, nothing appeared changed. Stone sarcophagi still lay where they had been. The tower's silhouette stood intact, but the air had shifted. The grave, oppressive feel that had cloaked the place was gone. Life had begun to return to the soil and the trees. By next September's harvest, this place might be green and thick again. He found a suitable angle, dove, and slipped through an open window. Inside was empty. The Grimm brothers had clearly been here first. The ornate candle holders, the silver and gold vessels, even some paintings were gone. Eno raised his wand to the floor and intoned, "Reveal the hidden." A faint glow traced along one wall as if a sleeping mechanism had been roused. Surprised and pleased, he followed it with another spell. Allahomora. A section of the wall eased open to reveal a small hidden cabinet set into the masonry, about a foot square. Inside lay two yellowed books, their page edges worn soft with age. They gave off no hint of the dark arts or any corrupting aura. They felt like ordinary volumes. For caution's sake, Eno ran a detection spell over them. Clear. He took the books. After that, he methodically searched the rest of the tower, including the 12 black sarcophagi below, to make sure he hadn't missed anything. Satisfied, he mounted the Black Swan and returned to Sophia's tavern in Shanghai town, the two old books tucked safely beneath his arm. Chapter 120. Every journey has an end. Inside a small tavern room, an oil lamp burned on the table, and two ancient yellowed books lay open. One title read Resurrection Ritual, the other announced Time Reversal. Eno stared at them and sighed. The feeling was like buying a cheap lottery ticket and discovering you'd won the jackpot. He was stunned, partly incredulous, partly unreal. The two books complemented each other, Resurrection and A Way to Turn Back Time. Putting Resurrection aside for a moment, the book on time was the real shock. Its contents were obscure and difficult, requiring elaborate auxiliary rituals, but its effect was irresistible. It could reverse time for the caster. It didn't rewind the whole world, only the person who cast it. Someone aged 70 who reversed 50 years would, when the magic ended, be 20 again. What was that if not a step beyond the Philosopher's Stone? Eternal youth, a kind of immortality. No wonder the old witch had hidden away for years without interference. And no wonder the exorcist squad had descended the moment Olivia began the ritual to resurrect her beloved. The foolish, clumsy princess had no idea how valuable those two books were. Even Emily's father, the dignified pastor and elite exorcist, preferred to spend his remaining days tucked away in Kellentown. Is this what it means to be the protagonist? Eno murmured, looking out at the dark sky through the window. His trials had been brutal, with brushes against death, but the rewards had been enormous. The thought of it thrilled him. Being the protagonist felt better than drinking Felix Felicis. In a story, the main character couldn't die and always walked away with something. Dawn found Shankytown wrapped in a pale mist like a wizard had laid a veil over the settlement on the old trade route. Outside, where the carriages stood, merchants were already barking orders to their assistants, loading goods onto wagons. The town lived by this rhythm, caravans in the morning, new ones replacing them in the evening. On the other side of the tavern, Jacob woke to the clatter of the street. He washed, then went to the bar for breakfast. 2 servings? Is your magician companion up? Sophia asked from behind the counter, amused. He got up yesterday morning and then kicked me out, Jacob said, shrugging. He didn't explain that Eno had sent him away so he could finish applying the potion properly. Jacob had helped bandage him with herbal dressings, and although he didn't fully understand everything, he respected Eno's wishes. You should have oatmeal, Sophia said. Injured people shouldn't be eating steak and bread. Harvest festival's coming. There was a fresh batch of oats in the caravan yesterday. A little later, Jacob knocked on Eno's door and pushed it open. My goodness, this is a miracle, he exclaimed, setting down the steaming bowl of oatmeal. He had seen Eno's injuries and couldn't believe the man had woken only yesterday, yet already looked fully recovered. Eno grinned. There's nothing miraculous about it. I am the amazing Black Swan magician. Ha ha! Yes! The amazing Black Swan magician! Jacob laughed, then switched tone to mock solemnity. It's a pity William isn't here. He'd have to add a part. The kind Black Swan magician finally awoke on the 7th day of his coma. It was like a wondrous magic. No matter how severe his wounds, he would always awaken on the 7th morning and all his injuries would be gone. Jacob mimicked William's storytelling cadence, and Eno almost said, why not change awoke to resurrected? But he held back. The Black Swan's chapter had ended last night. To milk it further would be greedy. Besides, William had already left Shankytown. Someone else's story was beginning. Oh, where did William go? Eno asked. Where else? Jacob shook his head, a little wistful. He heard about a caravan rumor. Someone who's got 3 magical items, a table that serves food, a stick that beats people, and a donkey that drops gold coins. Jacob sounded like a child watching others play from behind the railing. You should go after him. I'm really fine now. If you leave today, you might even catch up. The Grimm brothers' tale can't miss its younger brother, Jacob. Jacob hesitated. He'd stayed to care for Eno. Go on, Eno said, chuckling. I'm recovered. Don't worry about me. I'll be leaving in a day or 2 myself to spread those wonderful stories in distant places. No matter how long the road, a wanderer eventually returns home, either as a living person or as bones. Every journey reaches its end, and every story closes. Jacob left Shankytown to follow William. He left behind half a pouch of gold coins, 15 gold from Kellen Town, and the proceeds from selling the candlesticks and the gold and silver vessels after they'd cleared the tower. It had been a full pouch at first. Eno insisted Jacob take half. He'd already made outrageous gains and didn't need the rest. Besides, he'd chosen a path unlike Teacher Hans's, and this money should be shared with the Grimm brothers. It was only fair. Equivalent exchange. The Grimm brothers had worked for it too, and compared to the value of the 2 magic books, half a pouch of coins was nothing. A dragonfly skimming the surface of a pond. If anything, Eno had taken the whole pond.